This is Next Steps for Seniors with your host, Wendy Jones. Each week, Wendy brings resources and information to help guide you through those next steps with elderly parents and loved ones. If you have questions or topic suggestions, you can call us at 248-651-5010.
Hello and welcome to Next Steps for Seniors, Conversations on Aging. I am your host, Wendy Jones. So blessed to be here today with an amazing guest. As you know, my passion is to share information with so many people about end of life, things that happen as we age. And guess what? We don't need to be fearful of it. We need to be knowledgeable about it. We need to plan. We need to be open-minded, and we need to embrace aging because you know what? It happens to everyone. This is not a secret. We all get older every day. And we are so blessed today to be talking about a disease state that, believe it or not, is the second most common neurodegenerative disorder, primarily affecting 60 and older with a higher incidence in men, and that is Parkinson's. And with us today, I am so blessed to have Carrie Brinka. Oh, I said it wrong. Brinkador? How do you say
Brinkader.
it, Carrie?
Brinkader. Carrie Brinkader.
Okay.
There you go.
Brinkader. She is amazing. She is an exercise physiologist. Her and I just met recently at the NRB in Nashville, and she is so knowledgeable, works with over 60 people on a regular basis a month that have Parkinson's. And that's a very big thing, especially with movement disorder. So welcome, Carrie, to the program. So happy to have you here.
Wow, Wendy, this is such an honor and a privilege. I love educating people about this disease that so many people are finding themselves with this diagnosis. So thank you for having me today.
So grateful, so grateful. So I wanted to kind of start with the very beginning. You know, what are some of the things that people might start recognizing either in themselves or their loved ones that should just trigger some thoughts about maybe we need to do some research, like a couple signs?
Sure. It's kind of interesting. Within the Parkinson's community, there's a very common saying. It's when you've seen one person with Parkinson's, you've seen one person with Parkinson's, because this disease runs a vast array of signs and symptoms. So some of the things internally that people start seeing maybe 5, 8 years before they're diagnosed are a loss of smell. And sometimes they'll go to their doctor and they'll say, "Hey, for some reason, I kind of feel like I've lost my sense of smell." Some people kind of lose their sense of taste as well, but a lot of times smell. And well-meaning doctors will say, "Oh yeah, don't you remember you had the flu a couple of weeks ago? Oh, your sense of smell will come back." Well, that is typically a very, very early sign. So I have some fighters, we call them fighters, and where I am, clients that have Parkinson's, that it was a decade before they got diagnosed with Parkinson's, but they lost their sense of smell.
Wow.
I know, isn't that
It's
wild? That is
yeah.
a very benign symptom that you wouldn't think would be related. Um, Constipation is another internal symptom that a lot of people have as they start walking through this, like, man, things have changed. And so, again, well-meaning doctors will prescribe things and not know how to put these symptoms together. Sometimes people feel jittery on the inside. They'll say, "Man, I just feel like unsettled. I feel it's almost like I have butterflies in my stomach all the time." So that is a symptom, whether that's in the stomach or in the throat area. Sometimes they feel it there too. Obviously, the depression and the apathy that go along. You might be thinking, "Gosh, I just don't like it. I used to love to do woodworking. I used to love to go bird watching. I used to love to go on hikes." And you find yourself not wanting to do any of that anymore. That is an internal system that very,
Wow.
very often gets misdiagnosed. So those are some internal, symptoms that might happen very, very early on. So have you heard of those,
I have.
Wendy?
So yeah, what's interesting and the I've heard of the smell. I did not
Okay.
hear about taste and constipation, which
Yeah,
is very common in the elderly population, as is UTIs.
for
Um,
sure.
but
Mhm.
the jitteriness feeling is more internal, not shaking yet, right? Of the
Well,
external.
yeah, some people notice a tremor in their external extremities first, like maybe a pinky is starting to tremor.
Okay.
Or, maybe your leg is starting to shake. Maybe you're noticing that you're restless at night. So some of the external symptoms that people see are sleep disorders. A
Okay.
lot of times we will hear that we will see that, people are just not sleeping. They go to sleep for an hour, maybe 2 hours, and then they wake up and they are awake for 4 hours in the middle of the
Yeah.
night, and then they might catch another little cat nap, before they have to get up for the day. But sleep disorders are very, very common, very common. Of course, the tremors, that's something that a lot of people
Mhm.
see, or and they can start small. A lot of people see a very small tremor in a finger, a hand. Small handwriting is another one. If you used to
Oh.
have big flowy handwriting and then now you can barely get the words out on paper, that is
Carrie,
another
this is
symptom.
this is great information because honestly, most people assume that you have Parkinson's when your whole hand is shaking.
Right.
And these are all little tiny things
Yep.
that could, I mean, we're not saying
Good.
are, but could be signs and symptoms to look into and to pay attention to. So my gosh, this is fantastic. I never
Yeah,
even heard.
absolutely. These are, they seem benign, and you're like, oh, that's fine, it'll go away. But when another one is a soft voice, the voice gets softer. You can barely project to, people might say, What are you, constantly asking you to speak up. That is
Okay.
definitely paired with these other symptoms. That is a marker.
Well, what's interesting too is as we age, obviously, sometimes we have hearing issues. So you've got a husband and wife. I mean, let's just be real for a second. You've got a
Yes.
husband and wife, the husband speaking softer, the wife can't hear. I mean, and you don't know, right? But these are things to pay attention to. Thank you for that.
Yeah, yeah, and then, obviously, stiffness is one that people, like, "Oh, my shoulder is so stiff, my hips are feeling stiff," and you think it's a sign of aging because that is, again, very common. It might be a symptom of Parkinson's. Again, these are all mites, right? All of these things have to come together
Right.
and be diagnosed by a movement disorder specialist. But the stiffness, the dizziness, just constantly feeling a little off, um,
Mhm.
that those if you're experiencing a combination of any of these, I would highly recommend seeking out a very trained and skilled movement disorder specialist.
And so that is my next question because
Yeah.
movement disorder specialist is not a common thing that I think people know or have heard of. Can you explain to our listeners just a little bit about what that is and how you find a good one?
Sure, a neurologist, a lot of people will go see a neurologist, and that is fine, but a neurologist is a broad spectrum, and they are treating a broad spectrum of neurological disorders. A specific movement disorder specialist, which is a neurologist, but has very specific training in identifying movement disorders. Those are, yes, more specialized, and they seem to be few and far between.
Right.
I am based in Texas in a community that has a retirement community. We have a massive retirement community here where I'm located. And so we have a couple of really good movement disorder specialists here in our
Wow.
community that diagnose and treat our Parkinson's patients. And
Okay.
so I would highly recommend, the first step would be to see your family doctor, right? Your GP, and talk about these signs and symptoms. And then they will probably refer you to a neurologist, and a neurologist can definitely get you on the right track to a diagnosis and then a treatment.
And so the movement disorder specialist, and I'm sure we'll get into this more in our second segment, but finding the right one I'm sure is key. But in addition to that, following a regime, like a regular, because the more you move, we all know this, we talk about exercise every day. It is, from what I've heard, the number one thing that will help, stave off Alzheimer's disease, which is another,
Yes.
neuro. So I'm assuming it's similar, right? This movement disorder specialist is working with all your muscles and movement.
Absolutely. The movement disorder specialist will diagnose you and they will treat you. They will put you on a regimen of medicines to help. Now then, it's up to you as the person diagnosed with Parkinson's to seek out three things to educate yourself. Now, once you start educating yourself, just know it can be overwhelming. But education is key to know what's coming around the bend, to continue to socialize. Do not pull yourself out of community. Put yourself smack into community. And hopefully, in our next
Amen.
segment, we will talk about different ways to get involved in communities that can be supportive. And then, thirdly, they're all important: education, socializing, and exercise. Yes, yes, yes. We must exercise. Again, and hopefully in the next segment, we can talk about specific things for Parkinson's and the Parkinson's community with those three items.
We absolutely are going to do that because I'm telling you, it is critical. Number one, to understand these signs and symptoms first. Be
Yes.
aware, paying attention, looking at your surroundings, paying attention to your loved ones and yourself. And it's hard. These are
Mhm.
hard moments where you have to go, okay, this might be happening, but get
Yes.
ahead of it. And I want to thank you for tuning into Next Steps for Seniors Conversations on Aging. Stay with us because we're going to continue this conversation in our next segment. Carrie, you're a rock star. We appreciate you. And we'll be back in just a moment to hear more stories.
Wonderful.